here is how do you want to track. So the default is always to just track by the center point of the animal. If you want to do 3-point tracking, so you know where the nose point is, then just make sure you've selected this, because once you start acquiring a trial, you can't change it. So any data you've acquired with this center point, and the other thing is once we've acquired a trial, all of this is grayed out. You can't make any changes to it, so you'd have to start a new experiment and select the 3-point tracking in order to fix that.
Okay, so that was my question. I had asked you, was there a way? I thought there was an easier way to go back. So
no, and we've had people ask that, and part of me has always been like, well, maybe we should make it so you can change it afterwards. And the reasoning is that if you're acquiring, let's say 20 tracks for 20 different animals for one experiment, you want all the settings to be the same throughout, right? You don't want it to suddenly change, because then the data you tracked at the beginning might not match what's at the end. You want it to be as kind of automated as and consistent as possible. So we've left it that way as, okay, once you start, you can't change it. But yeah, so the only way to do it is to start a new file. However, or a new experiment. If you have saved video, you can always pull in the videos that you acquired already and rerun them in the new experiment with the 3-point tracking. So the video is separate from what's being tracked. So the track that you'll see, it's just overlaying on top of the video. The video can always be retracked. You could pull in a video from 5 years ago and track it as long as it's compatible. That doesn't matter. And you can track a video as many times as you want to.
Now, do we need to mark the animal? You know, put a mark on it?
Nope. As long as it's different from the background, the software is going to be able to track it.
So what Jess is doing, the base of her maze or her apparatus is dark, is black, and then the rats are white against that black.
That is perfect. Okay. That's exactly what we want.
Because last year I tried to track it, like it would just stay on like a point, like it wouldn't stay on the rat, like it would just stay on like one part of the environment.
So all of that comes down to playing with the detection settings, and we'll talk through that once we get there. So the first thing that we want to do is go to arena settings and draw the arena. So we have our nice fuzzy image now. I'm going to grab that as a background, and then I'm going to draw, let's just say that this outline here is what we want our arena to be. Okay, so that's where it is. You've specified this is the arena. You want to make sure that the arrow is pointing, it's going to track wherever the arrow is pointing. With specifying the arena, the nice thing is that the software will not track anything outside of the arena. So you want to make sure that you've gone a little bit larger so that if the animal does, let's say, rear up on the wall, you don't lose the animal. So you want the walls to all be included. But you don't want to go so far that if you do happen to walk past, it'll suddenly start tracking you. So you want to kind of get that just around where it is that you're tracking. Then you have the question of, do you want to draw zones within the arena? So if that's the case, I'm going to click on zone group 1. And let's say, so for yours where it's left and right, I'm just going to split it down the middle. So I'm going to create a line, split it right down the middle. It's not quite the middle, but we can move that over. Let's say, and then I click on add zone, and I can call this left, and add zone, and right. And there we go. I can also add another zone group. So let's say I want to know when they're on the left or the right, but then I also want to know, so I can call this one, can rename that, and call it sides. That's fine. And then let's say I also want to know whether they're in specific points within here. So if there's like a nest and you want to know if they're on the nest versus off the nest. So I could call this nest, let's say. And then as long as this one's highlighted, and you can change the colors to make it show up differently, things like that. Let's say this is where the nest material is. I can make a little circle there and call that nest left. And let's say there's one over here too. That's right. And now it'll tell me when they're in that area as well. The reason why I did a separate zone is because they're on top of each other. So because the nest zone is on the same side as left. So if I did it in this same zone group, the software would start to get confused about what it's supposed to be tracking and where. By separating it out, it knows that this is one zone and that's a different zone. So we can see just those there, see none of them, you can see that. So you're kind of telling it the layers of which you want it to look at.
Okay.
Let me see them all. So you can add multiple zone groups. That's okay. And then the nice thing to do is always hit validate arena settings, and it's going to tell us we have an uncalibrated arena. The software has no way of knowing how big this is. This could be housing a cow, it could be housing a rat. Like, it doesn't know. So we have to give it the real world measurement so that it knows how large it is. So I'm going to hit calibrate scale. This message always comes up telling you, you don't ever want to hit calibrate axes. That's for we have an option to do 3D tracking with 2 different cameras. That's what that's for. I had someone contact me once who was like, it's not working, I don't understand. And when they sent me their project, I said, that's because you did calibrate axes. And the software has no idea what it is you're doing. So you always want to hit calibration scale.
Okay.
So I say okay, and then I'm just going to draw a line within. Now here, if I've drawn the arena slightly larger, I want to make sure to do this as exact as possible across the arena itself, because from this measurement, it's going to calculate distance traveled, velocity, things like that. So this you want it to be as exact as you possibly can.
So Abby, that video image is as big as you can make it, right?
Not necessarily. You certainly want it to be large enough so that when you're seeing the animal, it's taking up enough pixels for it to be, the software to be able to make it out. With a rat, a distance like that, if this were on the floor, would be fine. You could zoom it in more if you wanted to, and if we focus this, my thought is it will probably zoom in a little bit more. But you don't need to be right on top. If you're tracking something like a bug, an insect, then yeah, you're going to want to be pretty close to that because it's not going to take up nearly as many pixels.
But if you were to increase that, that's about a quarter of the window or so. If you were to increase that.
Oh yeah, you can have it take up most of this if you wanted to.
No, but the video itself.
Yeah, we can do that in a second. Let's say that's 100 centimeters, that's fine.
Can you do it diagonally, or is it better to do it?
Yeah, you just hit plus and minus to make it take up more or less space.
Okay.
You could do a diagonal if you wanted to, as long as you know for sure that that's how long that measurement is.
Okay.
If you're doing something basic like a rectangle or a circle or nothing kind of oddly shaped, 1 measurement is enough. Support will say that with any arena, 1 measurement's enough. If I'm doing something like the plus maze, where I've got a short distance on the arms, but then there's the longer distance across the whole thing, then I normally will do a distance from one end to the other, and then also tell it what that short distance is, just to kind of give it that one extra little hint of what size the arena is supposed to be, because it's kind of a weird shape. But for something like this, 1 calibration will be just fine. And then we click validate, everything's good. Then I'm going to go to trial control settings. Here, you're telling the software, because we're automating it, when I hit this button, when is it supposed to start tracking and when is it supposed to stop tracking? So you don't have to do that yourself. Right now, we have this condition in place. So when you hit the green start button, there's a condition of, and I'll delete this and show you how we pull it back up. So normally this is what it looks like. I'm going to put this condition of zone in here, and I'm going to say, change this to, I think, cumulative duration. So this is saying when the animal's center point has been detected in the arena for at least 1 second, let's say okay, drop that in, only then will it start tracking. So what that allows you to do is if you're in here by yourself, you can hit start, nothing's in the arena, it's not going to start tracking because it's not detecting anything. That lets you, maybe if your animals are outside, go get the animal, calmly bring him or her in, put them in, and that gives you, it'll wait an additional second. So you might even want to up that to 2 seconds so that you have time to get your hand out of you, and then it will start tracking. So it keeps you from having to do what you used to have to do, which was basically like have your finger on the button and try to drop the animal in at the same time, which was terrible for the animal. Or what we had to do, which was I would put it in and then run to the other room and hit start. So this puts that little condition in there. You guys can change it if you go to settings, and then here you can change it to 2 seconds, 5 seconds, doesn't matter, whatever you want to do. You can also do it based on if you don't want them to start tracking until they go to the left side or the right side. So you can pick, do you want it to be when the nose point is detected? So you can choose your requirements for when you want it to start tracking. So we have some people where maybe they don't want it to start until if the animal is starting in a hide box, they don't want it to start tracking until the animal comes out. So as soon as you see that nose, start tracking then, but we don't care about the rest of the time. So it's just up to you as to what your requirements are. But this is the basic one. Like once you see it for 1 second or 2 seconds, start tracking. Then you have to tell it when to stop. So the infinite delay basically means it's just going to keep tracking until you hit the stop button manually. So if you know that your experiments are always going to be
5 minutes.
okay, so we say after a delay of 5, oh, no, that must be on. Minutes. Stop the track, stop the trial. So it'll automatically shut off after 5 minutes.
Okay.
And it'll wait for you to do the next one. So that's a nice way to do it. You can have multiple trial control settings. You can have multiple arena settings. So if you're doing something, like if you're using the dry land maze in the next room and your location of your food changes each time, you can have multiple arena settings. Just take a background with the food in the different locations, pick the arena setting that you want, and use that one. So whatever you designate is the one the software will use.
Okay.
Okay, so how would you set another arena
You
setting?
just go right click on arena settings and hit new.
Oh, okay.
And then you can, and grab a new background image. And so you would make the adjustments you need to, grab a new background, and then you can change the name of it. So I can call this one, let's say, quadrant 1 or something. Call this one quadrant 2. You can also duplicate it. And now I've got a new one, and it's exactly the same as the first one.
Oh, cool.
So I can rename it.
So that looks pretty good.
So it helps to make things go a little bit faster in terms of setting up the new ones. Yeah, so if I do this one, sorry, duplicate that. I can't type today, sorry. Now it has all the same settings as the previous one. So now I could say, you know what, actually for this one, the nest is here, and the nest is down here. And then I don't have to go through the process of setting up the whole thing all over again. So it's going to save you a lot of time. You just have to make sure that the appropriate one, whatever's in blue, is the one the software is going to use to do the tracking. And what's really nice is that here in the trial list, so if I know, let's say we're going to do 10 animals today, then I can designate that for animal 1, I want to use this one. So you can already tell it, and now the software knows which one it's supposed to use for each of your trials.
Okay.
So you can prep all of this ahead of time. Same thing if you had different trial control settings. So let's say for some of your animals you want it to end after 5 minutes, others you want it to end after 10 minutes. You can designate that. We can call this one 5-minute test. You do another one, we can duplicate it. I can call this 10-minute test, and then I'll just go into here and change this to 10 minutes. And I want to apply it only to this one. I don't want it to change the first one. And now here in the trial list, I can say, okay, this one's using 5-minute test, this one's using a 10-minute test, etc. And so it's all done here for you. And so when you hit start, the software automatically knows for each trial what it's supposed to use.
Okay. And I noticed in the I believe it's the detection settings, there was a place where we could actually outline the shape of the object.
Yes. So here,
Yeah, just as she's got like a restraint tube that she's concerned with, and then around the restraint tube.
so what I would do with that is when you take your background image in the arena settings, have that tube be in there and designate it as a zone. So draw a shape around it and call it tube or whatever, and then you can also draw, we'll go back up to here. So let's do it this way. Actually, I'll do this one. We'll change some of this. So I'm going to rename this one as tube. So that'll be our new zone. I'm going to delete these. Okay, so now I'm going to do just a free form drawing, and let's say that there's a tube here. Okay, and I'm going to call it restraint tube. Then what I can do is do another zone, maybe slightly larger, around it. And then I can add in there, like, tube zone. So you know now it'll tell you the difference between when they are getting close to the tube versus actually have touched it. So it'll give you that difference in time. And when their nose is maybe coming close but hasn't quite touched it. So you would draw this one really close around the tube and then maybe have a slightly larger zone around it so you can see the difference in when they're near it.